Hi, I'm Michael, and we're going to wrap up data really quickly, but with one profound concept that is really worth talking about, even shortly, before we move on to trying to make sense out of this data in the table. And I know I've hinted a few times about what we're going to do next, but trust me, it'll be fun when we reach there. I would just like to make sure that we do go kind of in order because it's so easy to skip. It really is. It's easy to just skip right to designing, honestly. And you're going to see that in almost a second that designing within using data is pretty understood enough that it can do it for you. So we're going to show you a couple things. But the only point I want to make, and I've just gone ahead and imported a table into Airtable, and I love Airtable, and I'm going to use Airtable from now on. And I just did that through its import feature, which was easy. You just go in and import an Excel file. I just happen to have downloaded this, but we talked in the last video about where do you get data from. So just this is a place to work with, use, and manipulate your data. So, first of all, if you looked at your data, you can start to see that Airtable's begun to figure out a few things, not a lot. I would say at this point it's still pretty messy, deserves a little bit of tender loving care because the data, some of it, for example, this is a good example. Size, I don't know what this field means. I'm going to get rid of it. You get these from elsewhere. Sometimes, actually, I'm going to delete the row itself. Delete, yes. Nicely done, Airtable. So it is already making the point that I'm about to make is sometimes you have dependencies. You can connect your data to other data, and that fields and the fields that you're going to use to connect are worth talking about now, but it's wrong. That isn't one. Time, fine. None of these mean much to me, so I'm going to, this is called cleaning it up, at least in my mind. If you don't know what they're used for, ask. It's fine. Disk number, discount. So these came from iTunes, so it keeps a lot of this data in iTunes to run all the processes of iTunes. I'm not using it for that. I'm really using it to represent, hey, these are songs. So a song has a name, has an artist, occasionally a composer, album, pretty good so far. A genre, super important. I'm really glad I got that. And the rest of it, not so much. So I would delete all of these fields just to make it cleaner because what I'm trying to build is a concept of, well, what would I use this data for? But I do have one other question. Where does this data come from? Well, in iTunes, it's whenever I click add to a record, it'll populate this database. But in real life, your data has to come from somewhere. What is possible or easy, I'd call, is to do this. You go to the interface area and you're going to create a new interface. And it's going to be form. What we're looking to do is see where does the data come from, not necessarily how it looks. So there's a really terrific, Airtable does a great job of giving you some different options here. Maybe it's numeric, maybe either way, they've already got some sort of basic canned views that are helpful and maybe ubiquitous to even, so you can see, just spark ideas about how does the data look on the screen. But I am actually more interested in a form, which I'm going to create now. I'm going to use it based on that sheet. And you can see here, you can turn on and off some of the fields. I think we just said, hey, maybe some of these fields really aren't something that someone is actually going to enter into the database, certainly by typing. Terrific. But another opportunity to look and kind of see what the lay of the land is. And in this case, I'm going to describe it. Finally, set a name and description. New sheet 1. I'm going to call it terrific. So now I've got this song database, and it is, sorry, the worst interface ever. I can just type whatever I want. It doesn't really know or do much of anything. That's fine. The main idea here is it will understand the data type. So when you get to something like grouping, we talked before, hey, this is going to be a limited set or actually I think genre was it. But this is going to be a limited set of fields that are really going to be useful as we go to the next step, and it'll just build that for you, which is terrific. Other than that, demonstration over, just to give the idea that it will go in and build a form for you. Not that this would be a usable form, but in many respects it might be. That's what Airtable's good at. It's automated a lot of the sort of basic stuff for you. Now the other thing, so we need to know how the data gets in, but the other thing is how do we connect to other databases? And where they do that can be a little bit complicated. So they're going to show you some options here about maybe some rules that happen. So whenever you enter in a thing into the table, it might email you a response saying thank you for entering your songs into the table. Things like that. Really nice. Airtable, as I said, is very imaginative, and just exploring these options really go way above and beyond whatever you would get by having an Excel spreadsheet. Sorry, Excel, but I'm not a fan because they don't facilitate this kind of gathering or understanding of data that's submitted through a database. But I will say that they do have an area here called Marketplace. The idea being that you want to look at your table and decide and see, do I have the data necessary to find things from another database? And I'll give you an example in just a second, but that idea is important now because you might not have the data, it might not be in the right format that you would be able to go out and connect to another database or table. So I can just think of two use cases from songs. So songs, if you had a song name, a artist, and an album, all those three together might give you enough information to go out and ask another service to ask for, let's say, the current price of that record. Seems useful, and that price can be part of your design. That's it. So thinking about it, that you don't need to have necessarily all of the data in the table right now, but if you have the right format and information in there, you can go out and ask other services, and you can also have discussions about that. Hey, what kind of services would we like to have? So I'm just going to show an example that I thought did a good job. This is a site that allows you and others to submit and to chat about and talk about a list of any sort. And we did say that information architecture is about making lists, so I like lists. So let me go to my list. What it was able to do is when I started to enter an entry, it asked if it was music related, and if it was, it would allow me to go and connect to a resource which would then bring back the album cover and allow you to listen to a sample. So cool. We've seen an example of how even just with a few fields you can connect to another database out there in order to get really valuable things like the album art, perhaps a preview, etc. That concept should be true of almost all data as you're looking through it. Hopefully there are things there, addresses are a really popular one, so that you can imagine linking out and finding information from a service that might help you make a decision or two. For example, one thing that's popular, of course, is hours of operation. So that when you're reaching out and saying, hey, here's a store has a location, a store has certain attributes that you're storing in your table, you just don't have to own every other piece of data. One thing, though, to be clear, it doesn't seem too complicated, I hope, right now. You're just describing a thing, and you're using your imagination as best you can to describe that thing into fields, which are broken down into a very small subset of very rigid ideas, right? So it's that kind of it's not a super human thing, but it is slightly creative to say, well, what would you need to describe this thing? One thing I don't want to talk about now, but we will get into later as we start to get more sophisticated, is the another topic. This is data, and there's another topic called metadata, which For example, in this service, I entered an album. It went out and found the album for me, all this kind of stuff. I really just typed a couple of things in a form, but it also allows or creates a discussion forum for every instance that I put in. Now that is metadata. You don't really have to do that now, but it is nice to know that the world that we live in now is fairly able to go and add more value and more different pieces of functionality to a database so that you can have instances per record. So really all you want to make sure is that whatever your instance is of the record, if you're a popular one which I dislike is that your records are made unique by a number that we generated at random. It works. It's great. I prefer to think right now as a designer is what are the actual fields needed to show uniqueness in a record, and are those useful elsewhere? You know, if I gave you I think we just mentioned the album title and the album title and maybe the artist, you could come back to me with information that's very precise about that, such as album art or something. Yeah, album art's probably a good one. But this isn't just true of this topic. Almost any topic that revolves around modeling a thing should benefit from you thinking and discussing this with your extended team about what kind of things that you want to facilitate using it. So just make sure you don't get too confused between data that models a thing in itself and metadata, which can be used to augment that or create other value propositions within that. We do this now lately with taking a message and we can transfer it into Slack, which can then trigger Jira, which can then, so those triggers and being able to put things in different places so everyone can see it is terrific. But just remember that does not have to be a part of what you're focusing on now. And in the next video, we're actually really going to focus on the things in the table. So right now it's big picture. Are the things in the table describing this well? Is it make sense? Now, what are those things? And how do we manipulate those things to make an even better display or an experience that we want people to engage in?